Hi, welcome to the Shan Studios YouTube channel. My name is Wendy, and today I'm joined by Maggie Lin, a movement and meditation teacher who also teaches some classes here at Shan Studios. So today we're going to be talking about mindfulness and anxiety.
A topic really close to heart.
Yeah, I'd say so too. Especially now with COVID and the global situation, I feel like a lot of that is arising and coming very close to the forefront of my mind.
Yeah, like things happening, watching the news, scrolling through social media is like sometimes I feel that way.
Yes, for sure. So I feel like we hear quite a lot about mindfulness and anxiety as something like, oh, mindfulness can make anxiety so much better, so much easier to deal with. And I feel like there's actually many sides to that. Like we're given, especially with how media is now, things are very bite-sized. Like, oh, you'll see a headline like, mindfulness to treat anxiety, or mindfulness to get rid of anxiety or get rid of stress. And I feel like with articles being of that nature, it can be kind of confusing. It becomes kind of one note, like, oh, anxiety plus mindfulness equals no more anxiety.
Or zen and bliss for the rest of your life.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so I feel it might be interesting to explore kind of our different experiences with mindfulness in relation to anxiety. So
yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, how did you started practicing mindfulness? Was it something related to anxiety that got you into it?
I started practicing mindfulness through yoga. So we had like a little like after school yoga program, and then when I experienced Shavasana for the first time, I was like, whoa, there's something here. And I remember the first time I did Shavasana, it was such a strange experience because I had never really seen the value before to just stay still with what was going on in the body. And at first it was, very strange. But then after a few times, I was like, wow, there's something here that I've never experienced before in any other practice. And then from there, I continued to practice yoga and then also started looking more and more into mindfulness and meditation.
So can we take a pause here because some people might not know what Shavasana means?
Oh, yes. So Shavasana is, I'm sure you've seen memes about it where it's the posture at the end of a yoga practice where you lie down and then you just, you stay still in a lying down posture and allow the practice to be absorbed and allow the practice to settle and kind of digest in the body. So that's what Shavasana is.
They also call it corpse pose, which means you're like kind of like doing nothing.
So that was my gateway into a mindfulness practice. And I think when I first really started practicing mindfulness and meditation when I first started practicing with consistency, I did notice a big difference. I feel like before when I would talk to maybe teachers or parents about anxiety, they're like, oh, just plan better. Or, oh, worrying is of no use. Like, just don't worry. And they would tell me what to do. And then I'm like, so how exactly do I not worry if the worrying is just living rent-free in my mind all the time? Yeah. And then when I started looking into mindfulness and meditation, I was like, wow, so this is like the how of being able to reduce worrying. Sometimes it still comes up, but there was finally a way where I could find some traction and control there. Yeah, so it was very exciting. I thought, wow, this is it. This is the way I'm gonna fix my anxiety. I'm gonna become stress-free. I've never experienced anything before, and this is it. Everything's gonna be great from here, which ended up not really being the case. There's definitely a lot of aspects that were really helpful. But yeah, I got into it through yoga. Yeah, what about you?
Actually, my experience was very similar. I think I started yoga practice because I know that I was very anxious and I wanted to lose weight. And just, I think maybe similar to you, I don't know how you would define yourself, but I think I was very much pushing myself, striving for excellence. I was an athlete before, and I was always constantly busy. So doing yoga, I thought it was a physical practice, and then I was like, oh, I could just lie down and do nothing and felt so relaxed and grounded and held. It was amazing. And then eventually got into the mindfulness practice. My friend introduced me like, you just taste something really slowly and notice everything. Like, how is that gonna help me feel more calm? I had no idea, but when I did it, and we also did like a long version of Shavasana, which is like body scan, it really felt like bliss and butterflies and rainbows all of a sudden. And I remember I was so excited that I kept telling all of my good friends, practice mindfulness. Because I was like, no, I'm okay. I'm finally fine.
Yes.
But yeah, that was kind of like the first few years. But now, like, okay, there's more and more knots to kind of untangle and more knots to be with and to know myself better and to embrace all of that other stuff that come up with more kindness. I think that's a continuous practice.
Right, yeah, especially with what you spoke about with like the knots that still do come up. I feel like there's a lot of conversation about, oh, how great mindfulness is for anxiety, but the sense of there being a relational piece and still having difficulties, I feel like is not really talked about as much. And so for me, what that looked like was, so I had a very similar experience to you, like, I'm great now, I am stress-free, my anxiety's going away, my mind's becoming a very happy place, and then something would happen in my life that was difficult, and then I noticed the anxious thoughts coming back in, and I'm like, oh no, my life is a lie. I'm not doing mindfulness right, or I must be doing something wrong that I'm still feeling these feelings. And I feel like when it comes back that second time, after I felt like I believed that, oh, my anxiety's gone, and my peers would see me teaching yoga or mindfulness practices, and I think they also held a similar expectation, like, oh, Wendy has things figured out. And then so when the anxiety came back, it was almost like it wasn't just anxiety, it was like the judgment on top of it, and then on top of the judgment was doubt, am I doing things right? And then like imposter syndrome of, oh, should I even be teaching if I'm still feeling anxiety? And I think there isn't just a kind of ailment cure kind of relationship I had with mindfulness and anxiety anymore. It became more of a relationship, like, oh, something might arise. Is there a way that I can be mindful with it and bring some of that kind of tension there? So the relationship, it became richer in a sense, not necessarily just mindfulness makes this better, but mindfulness is a way where I can live through all parts of my life, the parts that feel happy and the parts that feel difficult and the parts that are somewhere in between them might not have figured out yet. Yeah,
I really agree with the living in a richer way, or like noticing the experiences with kind of more complexity almost, and allowing ourselves to have more complexity. I think I started the practice thinking, oh, this is good for my stress, my anxiety, almost like this is a solution, and then when I'm done with the solution, this will be all fixed. But actually realizing life isn't just about yes and no, closing and switching on, but things still come up, and how do I allow that? And sometimes I think initially I thought, oh, mindfulness is just paying attention, But on top of the paying attention, the kindness and the allowing is so important. The being with, a lot of times when I actually pause and notice maybe the anxious feeling that has come up in me, it starts to shift. But when I'm like, oh my God, I'm so anxious, what do I do? What's gonna happen? If I keep thinking about it, I give it more fuel and it becomes bigger. But if I step back and like, okay, can I be kind to this? Can I allow this? Then, ooh, it changed shapes, or there's some deeper yearning inside. So I think that feels much more interesting, and it's not so simple to explain, but it's actually beautiful. Things do change. And I noticed that for myself, a lot of the anxiety about things is a lot of times is, how do I look in this? Am I gonna look good? Is this okay for a yoga teacher to be this way, or like a meditation teacher to be this way? That really adds to it, and not allowing myself to feel anxious, and I always have to be zen. I become like this like one-dimensional, not very interesting kind of portrayal. But actually, life is so much bigger and richer than that. And yeah.
So I guess in talking about anxiety and mindfulness, does a specific situation come to mind where anxiety arose and then the mindfulness was able to come in to change the situation in any way?
It often comes in, but it doesn't always change the situation. But one of the examples that I experience all the time is teaching class. Even though I teach classes regularly, sometimes I'm still like, sometimes that anxious feeling still comes. And sometimes it's really, really useful to feel the sense of ground, my feet on the floor, on the yoga mat, and to breathe. And because sometimes the mind thinks, what are they gonna think of me? I need to be this way, I need to perform in a perfect way, or else people are not gonna like me. There are a lot of imaginary things that can go on in the mind to trigger all of that anxious feelings. So bringing awareness to the feet is like, okay, almost like not giving fuel to the brain, to all that thinking, and find the ground again. And something I find really useful, which I'm discovering, is to not see that people are looking at me or like thinking of how Maggie needs to be, but really feeling that this is something that I find useful, I want to share. And it's almost like I'm the vessel passing on what I've learned. And instead of thinking, oh, Maggie needs to think of Maggie, well, other people needs to think of Maggie in a certain way. That I, self, it's making things so much more difficult in this particular situation. So seeing myself as the vessel is like, it's a very healing thing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't exactly change the whole thing, but detaching from it a little bit is often useful.
Right, yeah.
And I feel so much more natural in this situation.
I really feel you with the more attention, kind of thinking type attention goes into that kind of like that train of thought that comes from anxiety, the more the embodied anxiety gets, like the sense of that physical feeling of anxiety. And I think one situation I can think of where the anxiety used to be very, very intense was I used to be really scared of needles. Just because I've had a bad experience with them before, and since that time, I think I'd always get like a really physical reaction when I have to get either blood drawn or an injection. And when I really try to bring mindfulness in, I think it's twofold. On the one hand, it's knowing that I'm going to anticipate the pain and anticipate all the bad things that could happen during the blood draw. and then also at the moment when it's actually going to happen. So the anxiety starts maybe the morning of, before I'm even there at the hospital or at the clinic getting a blood draw, and I'm already like, oh man, I hate this already. And then just to invite mindfulness in and say, it's not happening now. And before I practice mindfulness, that would be impossible. I wouldn't have like the mental muscle to be able to really drop in and say, this isn't happening now.
So does it mean dropping into the moment to notice the pain isn't actually here? It's in the mind.
Yes.
That's what you're...
Yes. The pain isn't here. I'm not even at the clinic yet. I'm still in bed. I just woke up. And to say the experience isn't happening yet, what's the worry? And my mindfulness practice really allowed me to recognize that and for my body to really calm down. And then once I got to the clinic and once it's happening, what usually happens in my mind for anxiety is a lot of intrusive thoughts come in about everything that could go wrong, how painful it is, what if this, and all the possible options of how blood draw could go wrong are running through my mind. And where mindfulness comes in is just asking myself, well, what's happening right now? They're just disinfecting your elbow. Nothing's happening right now. It's okay. And as the blood draw actually happens, when the needle goes in, I ground into my breath leading up to the immediate moments before. And when it's happening, I draw my attention to the reality of the experience, the pain that's there, because it's never as bad as my mind thought it would be. When I used to stay in my mind a lot, my mind would magnify the pain, like, oh, this is the worst. All the scary intrusive thoughts are there at the same time. Like one blood draw is happening in my arm, 100 blood draws are happening in my brain. So being with the reality of this is what is really being experienced, and it's not so bad. It's 2 seconds of a little sting, and then it's done. And I feel like mindfulness there really allowed me to suffer less, both on the day of and during. And just that ability to be with that endurance that's cultivated with a sustained mindfulness practice, to be with what is really here and to focus on that instead of giving energy to the things that could be here but are not really present.
Yeah, mine is pretty special. It can invent a million options for us to worry about.
Yeah. So I think in talking about anxiety and mindfulness, there's like the practice, and then there's how we bring mindfulness into the situation. And then I think there's also a piece about how mindfulness allows us to see clearly and deeply understand anxiety. So I'm wondering if you have like an experience with that and what that experience is like for you.
Oh, I noticed that a lot of the anxious feeling come up when I have to perform, or like nowadays what I do is like I teach a class, and sometimes that just provoke like a lot of anxiety just got triggered in that. And the deeper I look at it, the more I realize there's this sense of I need to perform in a certain way, I need to be seen in a certain way. And if I don't do well, people are not gonna like me, or like that's incompetent. And the more I kind of see it and understand it and be with it, it's like peeling layers and layers of the onion and seeing more deeply, oh, when I was younger, I felt like I needed to be very good at tennis or be very good at school so that my parents would love me, people would accept me. So this is actually some deep-rooted conditioning from when I was like 6 years old. Like when I started playing tennis and winning all these competitions, I thought love and acceptance came from the winning, doing good at school. And so I think through the years, it became I needed to perform to win acceptance, this value of being alive. So eventually it became like I'm constantly doing so much. I'm constantly trying to perfect myself, seeing that, thinking that that's an equal sign with being accepted or my own deep down value. So knowing that was like, what? But, oh, okay, this is what's actually happening. This is deep down what's driving all of these behaviors. And being with it, softening around it, it's almost allowing the knot to loosen up a little bit, to not allow it to hold me so tight, having to perform every single time. And from that, I have more room to be me, to choose how I actually want to live. Do I want to do that much? Do I need to be that specific way in front of other people? So that gives more freedom.
Right. And in that deep understanding, do you see it show up really tangibly in your everyday life?
I just took the longest break I had like in my whole life. I took like a 3-month kind of almost vacation from the lockdown. So I could never imagine doing that before seeing this kind of deep down thinking. So yeah, this is giving myself that chance to just live instead of correlating my values with work. And it felt scary at the beginning, but I felt this was medicine. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so just choosing to be kinder through action, through not pushing myself so hard with work is a way of it manifesting itself. And I feel with things getting busier, I hopefully can keep this. Can I put myself, prioritize my needs first instead of how people are going to look at me?
Right. I think if you were to give a few words to someone who might be struggling with anxiety and has turned towards mindfulness to maybe be with it a little easier, what would you say to them?
I think actually, when I first came across mindfulness, it was a lot about like meditating, noticing the breath. But recently I've noticed that the breath can be quite triggering, especially when I'm feeling anxious. So sensing the ground, the connection with the ground, move the body, like do running meditation, movement meditation, do yoga, walking meditation is really useful. Like maybe you choose a stretch, like a short walk, like maybe 10 steps, 20 steps, 10, 15 steps, and notice how your mind feels at the beginning and how your mind feels at the end of that 10 steps. And it does change, and I feel there's a lot of possibility to notice that the conditioning of the mind, how it feels, that shift within that 10 steps if you keep paying attention. So it's very optimistic, because that feeling, whatever we're sensing, maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's something else, it does shift through us really paying attention at the moment. So I remember one of the first meditation videos I watched is like, oh, imagine your thoughts, your emotions are like clouds passing by or like cars passing by and not being attached to it. I think that is a really good practice to notice that the emotions don't have to be with me. It does change, and through us paying attention right here, right now, instead of fueling the emotion. So yeah, that's more than a few words, but
Right, yeah. I think, but you captured a lot of important things that kind of don't be afraid to explore like how you handle anxiety. And I think I would say something really similar, like learn a lot about different practices, because my initial entryway was a very, not to say that there's no merit to it, I still practice like this a lot, but a very rigid only sitting practice, being still, and that was it. Experiment with movement, and experiment with walking meditation, experiment with sitting, experiment with lying down, learn a lot, find teachers. And also one big thing is that even with mindfulness, I still love having a therapist. And I think if someone's experiencing anxiety, just that professional advice is always there and is always a good idea. There's no shame in having a therapist. That doesn't mean something's wrong with you. I feel maybe that stigma is less now, but definitely when I was younger, that was a thing. Oh, if you have a therapist, it says something about you. You're like that person with a therapist. I feel like there's no need for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I was just going through our notes preparing for today's video, and when I typed anxious in my Google Drive, my journaling from 8 years ago about seeing a therapist for the second time. My first time seeing a therapist was when I was in high school, and then the second round started 8 years ago, and it has my journal is called Little Big Anxious Heart.
Oh!
So yeah, they're really useful. It's good to find a suitable therapist to help work with you.
Yeah. And I think that in itself can be a mindful decision. I feel like the definition of mindfulness, it doesn't need to be small. It doesn't need to be, oh, mindfulness is sitting still. Mindfulness is doing breath work. Mindfulness is only doing certain things. When the definition, if the attention can be there and that kind sense of being with, attending can be with the experience, then it can be within the realm of mindfulness as well. So just to kind of, any boundaries there are in that definition, I think ultimately did not serve me.
Yeah. It's the relationship with all things.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Maggie, for joining me for this conversation about mindfulness and anxiety. It's a conversation that I wish was more available when I was starting mindfulness, and even before then when I was struggling and feeling all that weight from anxiety.
Oh, I'm actually feeling chills all over now. Like, I think these conversations are really important, and I think when I felt most difficult was when I felt I was struggling on my own. I was all alone, but actually all of us, if not most of us, feel this. So it's just a common humanity, a human condition that comes and goes sometimes. So such a pleasure to be here and to share this with more people.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. If you like content like this, please hit the subscribe button. And if you like this video, please leave a like and a comment down below. Hopefully we'll see you next time. Have a great day. Bye.